others we've been working with at Battery Park City on this project, and to our colleagues at the LMDC who are also here, and others. So a few quick highlights, and then my colleague Matt Best can talk a bit more about the project in detail. I'm Jeff Mandel. I work with Deputy Mayor for Economic Development, Robert Steele, and we are here to provide a bit of an update and discussion opportunity about next steps on the Thames Bridge. Quick background is, this is a project that for any number of years now has been a priority for the community and for others, and it's weathered a few cycles of the economy and you know, the commitment of the political leadership and the community and folks in the room who've been working very hard on this, I think has managed to sustain through that period of time to get us where we are today, which is a project that is pretty close to you know, getting off the ground, subject to a couple of things which are part of what we'll be discussing today, and some follow-up actions. So I think it's an exciting moment. That's the culmination of a lot of work, but a lot of work still left to do. And it's a hard project because of some of the logistics, not so much from a construction or another perspective, but more in terms of aligning the ducks amongst the various organizations. And I think one of the nice aspects of what we're here to talk about today is that we've actually had a really nice collaboration buy-in among the city, my colleagues, colleagues at Battery Park City Authority staff and board colleagues, as well as the leadership at LMDC. And I think it's been extremely helpful to untangle a couple of loose ends and tying them back together again, so that we're in a position today to have a conversation about a project that I think is potentially a very nice addition to a community that we all care a great deal about. So hopefully we can walk you through a bit of the overarching ambition is, what the project it looks like, schedule, and how we imagine the funding might work, subject of course to the approval of all of you and a handful of others. So maybe we could just click to the slide.
Okay. The scope of the project in a nutshell is to construct a new bridge at West Thames Street from the north side of the Battery Park garage, crossing over to West Thames Street in the vicinity of the dog run. And there'll be connectors, ramps, stairs, elevator combinations to get people to the elevation to cross the street. Also, part of the project will be the removal of the existing crossing at Rector Street and the restoration of the park on the west side, and then the sidewalk infrastructure on the east side to more or less bring it to the point where as if it never had existed in the first place. Here's it just zooming in a little closer on the bridge. As you can see, we're going across. This is working on conceptual studies that were performed by at the request of Battery Park City about 4 years ago, where it was concluded that the space is available in this configuration. There were studies that looked at doing what would be probably more obvious, straight across West Street to the north side of West Thames Street, but for various reasons, the presence of the playground, more kind of intensive park infrastructure on that side, as well as the fact that one of the main pedestrian drivers for school children is down to the south of this location. It was determined that this alignment would work just as well. And so this is the alignment we're proceeding on. We're showing ramp infrastructure, stairway infrastructure, elevator infrastructure. All of those things will be studied in more detail as we go forward. We're just beginning the preliminary design process at this point.
And the entry point from the east side of the highway, what options were considered there? That street is a very narrow.
That's right.
Street.
It's a very narrow street, and we're taking the entire sidewalk with our ramp. And the way we're going to deal with that, because people still need to continue down the street and go out to West Street.
Very narrow sidewalk.
It is a very narrow sidewalk.
About 3 feet.
It's actually 6 feet 6 inches to get in there.
Okay.
We can have 6 feet 6 inches of clear, at least. I may be cutting off a couple inches there, but it's tight.
Having the curve, it's very narrow.
Yeah, it's very narrow, and it's really between the property at 50 West Street, the property line there, to the actual column of the garage, and that's our confining.
That's the safest crossing, because there's going to be a lot of kids.
Yes.
Flowing across.
Well, it keeps you away from the east side. It keeps you away from the tunnel. and tunnel infrastructure. And it allows people to come down Washington Street, as well as as the passage to the garage is being more safened up, I guess you could say, and made as a more of a regular pedestrian route. This just seemed to be the best spot for it. The east side is the tough one. The east side's the tough one. Didn't give us too much flexibility.
So the ramp is 3 feet wide, and the remaining.
Oh no, the ramp is at least it's greater than 6 feet wide. The remaining sidewalk will be completely taken up by the ramp. So what we're proposing to do, since it's a city-owned street, is to bump it out into the street. So you can see in this area we'll be constructing new curbs and sidewalk on the south side of the pier that's supporting the garage.
And that's the northern exit lane out of the Battery Park.
No, that's J.P. Ward Street, which is the continuation of Washington Street that gets you out onto West Street.
Just going to make the street a little more narrow.
Make the street a little narrower. It will take parking lane that's present there. So 3 or 4 parking spaces.
That's one concern, but my broader concern is the access to it, because
Yes.
people have to cross. Is that Greenwich or is that Church? Is that
Eventually.
coming from the Lexington line, or the 2 and the 3?
Yes, eventually you have to work. Pedestrians will have to work their way from the Broadway corridor across Trinity Place.
And actually, that's an interesting observation, especially, and I think it ties into a lot of exciting things that are happening in this area. Historically, the Greenwich South area has been a bit of a peculiar blip between all the success you've all had in Battery Park City on the one hand, and Wall Street, in the conventional sense of Wall Street, slightly just to the east, and then of course to the north is $10 to $15 billion of public investment at the World Trade Center, and right smack in the middle is this area that's been a bit behind in terms of taking those next steps. And one of the things that's going to happen from the bridge is ideally that it would help improve the connectivity broadly between the Wall Street area and Battery Park City, and then hopefully in so doing create a better streetscape and an experience in terms of folks who are going to be making that pedestrian trip. And I think the Downtown Alliance has been working a bit with the MTA to help improve that corridor. So now, when you walk through the MTA garage, and I apologize, we don't have this on the map, so you have to work from memory if you're familiar with the area. There's a walk-through underpass at the MTA garage, and I think they're trying to put in a bit of signage and a little bit of architectural help in terms of smoothing that overarching transit by foot.
So this is very, very conceptual. This is just the initial take.
Is that what it's going to look like?
Well, no, probably not. But this is fresh off the presses of our architects, and it will go through many iterations of design. We haven't even really had a chance to go on it yet. So but we felt we could not come to you without showing you something. What the architects are envisioning is carrying the concept that was developed on your previous effort 4 years ago of having this lenticular truss structure, lenticular truss being trusses that form a lens, and making it light and airy so that it looks like it's floating above the roadway. It does not compete with the street, the view down West Street, which as you come out of the Battery Tunnel and turn right onto West Street is just dominated by One World Trade Center. So it's looking at something that will complement the streetscape but not compete with what is becoming the new iconic view of downtown New York.
And just to underscore something that Matt said, so you shouldn't look at the color or the particular materials with any fine-grained sensibility at this point, because this is really just about having something to talk off of today. We had to push people a little bit just because we're just at the start of the meeting.
Right.
If it turns into a big blue site, then
Right.
you want to say.
Well, we'll see. Well, so to speak about where it's going to go, it's the project is being managed for the city and for Battery Park City by the Economic Development Corporation, and they are in tight partnership with City DOT, who will own the structure, with the Battery Park City Authority, who will perform day-to-day maintenance of the facility, as well as it serve primarily folks in the authority's territory, as well as the Lower Manhattan Development Corporation, who is providing a good portion of the funding. So that as we develop the project, and of course in partnership with State DOT and the Hudson River Park Trust and all the partners, the myriad partners that you always have when you are putting infrastructure in the city. So this is an overview of our budget at this point. So we are commencing design and environmental studies at this point. And that will produce a project that we can, one, get through environmental studies, which will unlock the federal funds, as well as provide us construction documents to proceed. Hard construction costs and project soft costs together, we're looking at the actual construction contracts in the $21.5 million range. And then that leaves us with a contingency of $4 million. And our number one focus of this project from a budgetary standpoint is to minimize how much we have to tap into contingency, stay as far away from it as we can. Work as hard as we can in the design phase to make sure that we have a project that we can afford and that what funds are put in are all that's going to be required. This is a fairly good cushion for a project at this point. We are building a new piece of infrastructure in an area where there's a lot of knowledge of what is below grade, which is not often the case in a New York City project. We're not ripping into an old existing structure and having to connect new infrastructure to it. We're building a freestanding structure in place, which hopefully, as we proceed, that gives us confidence to have a good project that hopefully will come in under budget.
And this is also based on a bunch of historic work that folks in this room have been important players in, and that was refreshed and reviewed by a cost estimating firm in anticipation of taking further steps on this project, so that this budget reflects something that obviously has a lot more fine-grained analysis that would need to be undertaken to say, at the highest levels of confidence, precisely which line items are which. But from an overarching perspective, it has been vetted, and more fundamentally, I think the commitment, going back to our original point of departure, that there's a nice partnership amongst a lot of institutions here. The commitment within that partnership is to appropriately balance design and cost trade-offs, to the extent that we do see things that move on the budget in the wrong direction. Hopefully there'll be things that move in the right direction, but inevitably there are going to be decisions that have to get made, balancing cost and design features, and everyone's prepared for that.
So I have a question. So how did your cost consultants, what did they base their $18.5 million on? I mean, they have all you have is conceptual drawings at this point, right?
Right.
Did they benchmark against other similar projects that you're doing currently?
Well, they did look at materials also.
They took what was the previous design that was done 4 years ago, which had drawings to a level where they could estimate how much steel would be in the structure, how much concrete would be in the structure, what the excavation requirements would be, what the traffic control would need to be on West Street. And from there, the firm's deep construction experience and managing construction projects as their core mission, they came up with a conservative estimate, which is what we based the 18.5.
Who did that?
At this point, we prefer not. They did that work for us pro bono, and while there's contracts that are going to be let, there's just to do that.
Then does the conceptual that you just showed us, is that reflective of what they looked at that was done 4 years ago?
It is actually,
generally speaking.
In some cases, architects taking a slightly different vision, which should reduce some of the costs. So we feel that might even be a little conservative at this point, but as we go through and we have a lot of players that we have to talk to, projects tend not to shrink. So we obviously will look to control that. EDC is a master at keeping projects from scope creeping too far, especially when we don't have a lot of pieces that are out of our control, which is the case with this. Most of this project will be within the control of our contractor, not victim to circumstances of old construction.
This is the capital stack. It's a static portrait of the tranching of the proposed tranching of funding, and so this was designed in an effort to match the or to create the right tapestry of funding streams given the different regulatory restraints that different organizations have to operate with. And so the theory is that, or rather the proposal that you'll all be considering, or some duration of it, would be for Battery Park City Authority to fund the initial work for design and environmental, and then the LMBC, which will be providing the overarching majority of the funding, would have the slice of the stack for construction. To the extent that it costs more than the 22 million, which we anticipate it will, and hope it comes in under 27.5. But theoretically, that Battery Park City would cover the last tranche up to that full amount. Hopefully, we're a bit under, but that's the envelope.
So the total projected, the prior, can I see the prior slide, please?
Yeah, 27.5.
That's 27.5. So it's the contingency. It's the for your development amount of the other contingency.
Last slide.
Yes, just an overall timeline for implementing the project. We have a contractor on board now that is beginning to do preliminary work. We do not have funds to pay them yet, so we're keeping that as limited as possible. They're willing to get out of the gate as part of their own education period, as well as just speaking with people to begin work. As we go over the early spring and through into early summer, we are going to be working on our design. And a big part of the design, obviously, there will be pencils to paper engineering studies that are done to develop the design and cost it, so that we are confident that what we're putting down can be built to all of the agency standards within our budget, but also is just a very extensive community involvement with all of the stakeholders on the project, going through our regulatory processes, the environmental studies that will be approved by the LMPC, the elected official organizations, as well as getting through the Public Design Commission process. We are projecting to get a finalized preliminary design by July of this year, at which point they'll begin on detailed construction documents. We mentioned a couple of the pieces of work, the fact that we need to widen the sidewalks on JP Ward Street. There'll be some relocations of utilities. There might even be some work that we can do for the bridge foundations that can be split out from the overall construction documents of the bridge that we can let as an early contract. And we're proposing to do that and have groundbreaking in November of 2013. That'll be followed by another round of contracts for the actual superstructure of the bridge. The construction will begin in earnest over top of 9A through 14. When the bridge is open, hopefully in early 15, Rector Street will be demolished. The area underneath Rector Street will be restored, and we should be completely out of the area by the end of 2015.
Is this bridge going to require elevators?
Yes.
On both sides?
The bridge will require an elevator on the east side. There's really no debate on that. There's not enough room along JP Ward Street to affect a ADA accessible ramp.
What about the other side?
The other side is an open question. It's a balance of capital construction costs versus ongoing operating and maintenance costs.
Can we have a bridge that's not handicap accessible?
No. You cannot build a piece of infrastructure that does not accommodate all of these.
Well, what's the alternative for a person in a wheelchair when they get to the other side of the bridge?
A ramp.
Your plan is showing a ramp.
A
If you
ramp.
could go back to
Okay,
the...
what's the elevation?
It'll be about 24 feet. This is my guess. Roughly.
Right there.
It's long. It's long, and it switches back on itself.
It starts here, you come up here, you turn,
So-
and you go this way up to the bridge, and that's a ramp.
Now, the community comment is that they'd like to see elevators on both sides, and we're going to look at that. That's something you have to balance, because elevators are difficult. Especially elevators that are outside, are difficult, and they break down. When they break down, people who are in a wheelchair or are mobility impaired are going to need to cross West Street again at grade crossing, which kind of eliminates the main purpose for this expenditure. So, but we're going to have an elevator. We can't get away with one, so then the question is, how much worse is two?
Get away without one.
Without one. And maybe two would be as well. And then we could look at, instead of a ramp, just a stair, which then means there's a lot less of the walkway that's taken over. There's concern that these trees are going to have to go with the placement of the ramp, which is obviously a concern that it shades the dog run. It's part of the overall vision of the corridor. So there may be a lot of benefits to go to having an elevator on the west side as well. So that'll be one of the very initial things that we'll discuss. Obviously, we need to discuss it with all of our partners. So there was a number of comments that we received that you guys, the Battery Park City Authority, when they were preparing this project in the pre-conceptual method a couple of years ago, that they received from the committee for an elevator on the west side was one of those comments.
What about cover?
Cover was another one of those comments, and that's a comment that we've, in our initial coordination with your folks, is that we'd like to see, and that would be one of the things that we will be studying as well.
See, because you mentioned scope creep.
Yep, exactly.
Okay?
Right.
The width of the bridge is currently contemplated as what?
Right. The width of the bridge, I'm going to have to...
8 feet?
I believe it's a little wider than 8 feet. I want to say it may have even been close to 10. And that is comparable, if not wider, than most of the other pedestrian bridges in the city.
Okay.
Obviously not the ones, really high volume ones to the north along 9A.
Okay. Because, the width is going to be an issue.
And it will be constrained. I mean, the width across the bridge, obviously, you don't want to make it as narrow as your narrowest point. That doesn't make any sense, but it will be constrained on the stair on the east side.
This is going to be more like the bridge at Chambers Street than the bridge at Liberty Street.
Oh, absolutely.
Wherever that is, BC
Correct.
Street.
Yeah,
right?
Liberty or BC. Either Liberty or BC. Obviously, Liberty is in closed space condition. This will not be. This will be open. Maybe covered. Now, one thing I mentioned is the architects are already looking at what would be a less expensive structure as far as cladding systems and whatnot. That may free up funds for looking at a roof. But the roof then brings itself to, the roof tends to increase the cost of the structure because now it's more or less a sail which is catching the wind, which will strengthen the underlying structure. So and that's all part of the design process. We need to look at this holistically.
But the numbers that we have are not, for example, exploded by
various stakeholders, community board, people like that, and these things are going to come up. And my only issue is let's have a budget that is going to be realistic for what we anticipate we're actually going to end up doing if we...
That's an important point, and just with respect to the items you've described in your questions, they're consistent with the budget. So, for clarity, you've identified, let's say, the two hot buttons. There'll be others, plus or minus, but we're not showing you a budget that doesn't reflect the capacity for this.
Okay.
So they assume elevators on both sides and covered walkways?
Our initial estimate does not. However, we're looking at other things that can be cut from the initial estimate, such as a lot of money in a cladding system. That could be towards the roof. And then we want to reserve that $4 million contingency as long as we can, but eventually a trade-off needs to be made.
So just one more question. So, we had an experience with Pier A where we committed to something and we ended up absorbing an overrun. So by committing to funding the last 5.5, are we also committing to absorbing any overrun? Or what would happen if we go to 27?
You're at the heart of the matter.
What happens then?
Well, I think for starters, just to take a step back, because I think
We all don't want to get there, but if we get there, what's the discussion?
Right? So I think it's important, number one, to just separate the Pier A experience from this. Because while, projects of all shapes and sizes have overruns and issues, that's a far more complicated project for a number of different reasons than the one we're describing here. Again, that doesn't allow someone to sleep at night, but I think it's important that we sort of separate those two things. To the question generally of how we're going to treat overruns, this is not a bonded project, right? There's no third-party guarantor here. The reality is that we're going to have to figure it out if we get to a point that there's the possibility of an overrun. But the way that we're designing and managing the project and setting up the boundaries at the beginning is with an ample contingency, with a lot of work on the front end of design. And look, the reality is if we get to a point where, you know, through a community process, it just becomes unbuildable or unwieldy for some reason, maybe we don't do that project. I think we're all here committed to the project, but a project that's within what's fundable and consistent with the vision that all the parties have.
I think that's fair. Where is Dave?
The demolition cost for the Rector Street, is that
Come up
included
to
in
the
the budget?
table.
Yes, sir. It should be under $1 million, but we've, I think, posted at $1 million within the budget.
Yep.
I just want to take a moment and are you not a predecessor of mine?
I was the president of the authority in the...
Oh, so you had a real job. Okay. Not like me. This is David Emmett, and you run Lower Manhattan Development Corporation, do you not?
I'm now the president of the Lower Manhattan Development.
So you got the $20 million check
Yes.
compared to our paltry 7.5. Here are the policy questions for the members that we've touched on here, as I see it, right? First of all, I understand Lower Manhattan Development Corporation, assuming advance authority, reimburses expenditures that have been made. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so the mechanism by which you could approach that waterfall, that reverse waterfall of money, relies on the fact that somebody spent something, so someone can send it over to you and say, we spent this, please reimburse, assuming it comports properly with all of the requirements. So are we suggesting that LMDC is going to fund this and get that Battery Park City is going to fund this all the way through with reimbursement coming after we spent the first $2 million?
So your question, just to put it into my parlance for a moment, to make sure we're describing the same thing, is we've got permanent financing, if you will, by the LMDC.
Right.
There's a timing consideration, and how do we recycle
Cash flow.
So we're talking about a concept that would essentially use the Battery Park City funding to create an effective revolving facility
Right.
that would be taken out by the LMDC. Now, the benefit of the collaboration that we have, I think, is that we are in a position where, and David can describe this, you know, in his own words, and I don't want to speak for him, but I think where we have the ability to work in a more of a front-ended way with the LMDC than on other projects that haven't had the level of
Well, all right, but
development.
that's a function of response time, assuming that we have funded it, we check the boxes, dot the i's, cross the t's, get it in front of you. Then the question is, what's your process and how long does that take? Now, we have the capacity to fund this. I'm not suggesting we don't. But the timeliness of how we can interact with LMDC for reimbursement will be highly critical in terms of our own results on our own fiscal year. And if we experience delays, we are looking to the city, because in the end, if we have any extra money, you guys get it in a different pocket, right? So, David, my thought process here, and what I'm trying to explain to the members, is that as we fund the project, and we have the expectation of reimbursement, if for whatever reason that we don't currently contemplate, the reimbursement is either not forthcoming or substantially delayed, or you've committed $20 million, it's a known number, if we get into the creep and we end up with a $40 million project, to take an extreme hypothetical, of 50% growth, right? And stranger things have happened, maybe it won't. That's a burden that will cascade back on the authority. LMDC is in for a known amount of money, am I correct?
To date, yeah, capped at 20.
Okay, that's fair. So that's what they've allocated. We will try to drive a process to get an MOU that's definitive in terms of how we will cope with these contingencies, so everybody understands the ground rules in advance of what we said we would do if it costs more, if reimbursement is delayed, or whatever might happen that's inconsistent with what you've laid out. I'm not suggesting any skepticism, but we just want to have mechanisms in place that we've agreed in advance how to deal with those contingencies
Sure, and I don't
that
want-
hold you harmless at your cap,
I don't want to get out in front of the staff who are working on this, but I always believe it's appropriate and respectful to be direct. So we should not undertake this project together on the assumption that there is some sort of, assignment of risk in advance of what happens if there are overruns. Because the reality of the project is that's just not how these things tend to go. And I'm not saying that in a way to be at all disrespectful, quite the contrary, because as you've identified correctly, of course, we're financially at risk as the city because of our relationships to Battery Park City Authority proceeds. So I think what we've all set out to do is to undertake a project that we are highly confident is doable within the parameters we described, and that we're all committed, again, between the design, funding.
Look, I understand. We have to be realistic. We have to be realistic. We have elected officials in various places that represent people that live around. If we decide that the $27.5 million doesn't get a roof, and 6 months from now, or 9 months from now, looking at this calendar, we find out that, you know what, there's going to be a roof. It could happen. There's going to be a second elevator. This happen, whatever it is, and we can't get it done within the 20 hours. We know all that by July, and all we're in for is the design and environmental studies, and we had such a catastrophic, understanding of the future that we decided to abandon the whole project by, okay, that could happen. I would argue that is a much less likely outcome given the people that are interested in seeing this happen, that have significant influence over what the various instrumentalities that state and city government do and don't do. So I believe the bridge is going to be built. And I'm not suggesting it's not going to be done at $27.5 million. I am suggesting that we will want to understand the risk, and we will want to assign that risk in advance so that agencies that sign up to participate in the process will know what risk they are taking and what the potential outcomes are, and we have an understanding in advance how to deal with those.
I think we've shared a perspective, and we can continue to do so in private forum. We've shared a perspective with your staff colleagues and the board. So happy to continue that discussion and see if anyone has any time.
As long as we're clear.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying.
But with respect to the board, I also want to make sure that everyone understands that, and I leave David to speak on behalf of the LMDC, but from the city's perspective, that we've also been very straightforward in our perspective with your colleagues in discussions. And so I just don't want anyone to
no, everybody's been straightforward, but I've yet to hear from anybody a suggestion about how we would deal with material cost overruns or very substantial delays, even though we're in good faith, right? Very substantial delays on reimbursement. Those will be two cardinal issues that this board is going to have to understand and deal with in a document. And I want to be as direct with you about our viewpoint in that regard as you are with us. We'll get there.
Yeah, no, I think.
But we're going to deal with this issue up front. That's what I'm saying.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So that's a pretty expedited schedule. Is it safe to assume you're going to do a design-build contract, so you'll have an architect and a contractor on board as you go through this design process?
Yes, and we have to be careful with the term. There'll be separate entities that are not contractually related to each other, but we will have have a construction manager who will hold the contracts on board early on, who will be assisting us with cost estimates as well as suggestions for how design can be economized and improved for the purposes of construction. But there will be no contractual relationship between the design team and the construction team, so that we can maintain clear separations of responsibilities.
But you also have an issue with the CM that oftentimes the higher the number, the better they do, right? So we want to make sure that if you're going to enter into that kind of arrangement, that we have a look at it, be sure there's incentives to bring costs in line.
Yep, and we're just about to release the RFP for the construction manager, and I believe you guys have the most up-to-date version of that. And if you don't, please let me know, and we'll get that over to you from EDC. But It's our intention of obviously keeping it completely above the board, not giving any financial incentive, giving a financial incentive to the construction manager to economize and serve his client, which will be us.
Good. Other questions from members?
To the cost.
Yes, Dave.
First of all, I want to say thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And I actually have never appeared before the board of the authority since leaving. And strangely enough, I have to ask for your recognition of the fact that I actually have a lifetime bar on this particular issue of appearing. I think it's because of the fact that I actually worked on this project when I was president of the authority 20 years ago.
20 years ago.
Yes, I believe that. I was here then.
And so I need to just note that and ask you to waive the whatever restrictions there might be on my speaking about. I think it's waived anyway because I'm here as a public official.
Maybe just wait because you got old.
I tell you what, it is because
I know that's happening.
There's very little I can remember of the original program. So, with that as background, I do want to talk a little bit about the LMDC funding to say that we share your concerns. The LMDC board shares your concerns, and it is it's both the practice of the board and a federal requirement that we not fund projects unless the board is confident. We have an audit and finance committee that there is funding in place to complete the project. And so one of the things that's happening here is, and the reason you saw the stack looking the way it looks, is that we will want to have a look at the construction costs associated with the project after the completion of the environmental and design review and after there's a determination that the environmental issues are satisfied and that federal funds can be spent. So there, from our point of view as well as yours, there's going to be a moment where we're going to look at. And hopefully at that point we'll have a better fix on what the real cost is going to be. Our board has allocated $20 million to this project, and all LMDC funds are allocated to, at the present time, to one project or another. So I don't want to give you the false impression that if the project were to cost more, LMDC has a deep pocket of federal funds available to allocate to this.
That's not our perception.
Project. So we would also want to look at the question of what scope changes there were, or whether whether they were appropriate, and whether we believe it could be built for the amount of money. I will say this: I want to echo what the city representative Jeff Reed said. There has been a very good staff effort trying to work through issues associated with this, and independent of the total cost, which I agree with you has to be concerned, issues associated with the cash flow is something we have worked out with Bob Serpico, with our chief financial officer, and we have a small ability to advance funds, a limited ability to advance funds.
But Dave, I don't think we have a problem.
And so I want you to know that we believe, I can't say that we're completely confident, but we believe that we'll be able to handle the cash flow issues on this project, combined with the revolving type facility that you talked about, and our ability to provide some advances should ensure that people get paid on a timely basis.
Yeah, but you know, plus or minus 30 days here or there, Bob's a magician. People will get paid. But I appreciate the fact that you and your board have a sensitivity to the issue. You've talked about it, you've thought about it, you're going to be as cooperative as you can to expedite, but you have a certain protocol. We understand that, we respect it. I've never heard anybody suggest that LMDC would do any more than the 20 million, so that's not in our thinking, and I don't think it's in the city's thinking. If it goes over the budget and you've got more money, great. You know, we'd love to have it. But one way or another, whatever we agree to do will be, as I understand it now, will be built around that $20 million commitment, and I'm not sure that we would seek to change that. But if something happens that interrupts what we're contemplating, all in good faith, I just felt that all of the participants should understand, okay, that's a hypothetical. What will we do about that if it occurs? Let's talk about it now before it's a problem. Let's not wait till we're in a crisis and everybody's pointing at everybody. That was the only point I was trying to make.
I do just want to finally say that the board is very excited about this project, and as with city, it's a high priority, and we're very happy that the authority is going to build it and that we can participate, and I look forward to working.
Good. So I have a question. So as this is referred to as a revolving line, does this mean that it's reimbursed on a 30-day basis, or is there some other method of financing this that you see?
It's not truly on a 30-day basis. Essentially, what we're seeing happening here is that you will provide us with, let's say, pencil copies of your anticipated draws.
Mm-hmm.
We will prepare draw requests and process them, but that you won't actually be able to take down the funds until they're truly reimbursed and reconciled against the actual expenses.
Okay. So in other words, it's not a $20 million hold until we have a sign off, and then
No.
Okay.
We'll work our way through it
Yeah.
based on anticipated
Mhm.
expenses. We won't actually fund until we have the completed work.
Which is fine.
Understood. Thank you.
Now remember, now, you see, we have to have authority signed by the controller and by the mayor for this project to participate at all beyond 100 or 150,000 in kind of, soft work, early on design stuff that we do from our operating budget. Once we get into a capital project, obviously we have to have the proper authority to do it. We don't think the mayor's a problem, since this is, he's one of the guys pushing this. I've spoken personally with the controller. He's quite happy to get this into expedite approval. We need to send him a piece of paper, which will come in due course when we can fill it out. Once we have that authority, and it becomes an approved capital project here, and given our timeline, if we're successful in terms of the bonding we're going to be doing, getting into the bond market in September, I don't think cash flow is going to be our problem. I really don't. I think that, and particularly in light of the expedited process I just heard you describe, of advanced work so that papers are kind of prepared, and when we have actually funded, the timeline to reimbursement would be a little shorter than it might otherwise have been if we didn't show up until after we had written the check and we had to go through and do all those things. I think all that's going to work really well. I don't see any big problems there. You agree, D'Amico? Yes. Other questions or comments on the bridge? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for having us, and
And,
thanks to all of your colleagues.
We'll get all this in the fund.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.